Good evening. Welcome to the special meeting for the purpose of conducting a formal hearing on the conditional use application of Betawood Residential Partners LP. And may I have a roll call, please?
Someone get a roll call?
She was making copies.
Mr. Myers?
Here.
Brodsky?
Here.
Rothman?
Here.
Lucio? Sanchez?
Here.
Thompson?
Here.
Shriver?
Here.
Carswell? Here. Spiegelman?
Here.
Fahey?
Here.
Gillespie?
Here.
Capone?
Here.
Bowman? Klein?
Here.
Hoover?
Here. Be advised, Commissioner Jimmy DiPlacido is excused. At this time, may everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the hearing, and I would like to turn it over to our solicitor, Mr. Michael Clark.
Thank you, President Luker. We are here tonight for a conditional use hearing. The applicant is Betawood Residential Partners LP. The property in question is located adjacent to the north side of the Betawood Shopping Center, which property has no street address and is identified as Montgomery County Tax Map Parcel Number 30-00-66644-00-7 within the Fairway Transit Zoning District of the Township of Abington, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. This is an application requesting conditional use approval to permit a transit-oriented development in the Fairway Transit Zoning District, including the construction of a 244-unit apartment building on the rear 8.32 acres of attractive land that also includes 10.56 acres fronting on Fairway Valley Road, which 10.56 acres are owned by Betawood Limited Partnership, and on which is located the Betawood Shopping Center owned by BSC Jenkintown Limited Partnership. This conditional use hearing has been properly advertised, and the applicant is represented by Mark Kaplan, Esquire. Mr. Kaplan is present with his witnesses. They've handed out information to the board, and we would ask Mr. Kaplan to proceed.
Mike, Mark Penical told us that he was handing out certain exhibits. I don't know that we have to do it because some of them were duplicates, but you're taking care of the advertising stuff
Yes.
and all that. Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Members of the board, my client, Betawood Residential Partners, is the owner of the rear 8 acres of the Betawood Shopping Center site adjacent to the Fairway. The front portion of the site was developed many years ago as the Betawood Shopping Center. The rear 8 acres that my client owns is undeveloped. Betawood Residential Partners is seeking to develop the rear 8 acres of the site with a proposed apartment building. This conditional use application has a bit of a complicated, maybe tortured history. We originally submitted a conditional use application to the township on February 4 of 2016 when the Fairway Transit District zoning was in place. I handed to everybody this book of exhibits. The first exhibit in that book is our conditional use application that I've just referred to. The significance of the filing of that application back in 2016 is that despite the fact that the township has changed the zoning of this site, the conditional use application is grandfathered under the FTD ordinance, and the FTD ordinance represents the governing zoning regulations for this application. Now, item number 2 in the book is a copy of the Fairway, the FTD ordinance. It's Ordinance 2000. As I said, it's exhibit number 2 in our book. Based on the conditional use that was filed, the zoning officer determined that in order to develop the rear 8 acres of the site, certain existing legal nonconformities within the existing shopping center would either have to be brought into conformity with the requirements of the FTD ordinance, or the applicant would have to obtain variances from those requirements of the FTD ordinance that Mr. Pennical pointed out. I've had designated as Exhibit A3 Mark Pennical's July 18, 2016 zoning determination. We did not agree with that determination. We believe that the existing nonconformities on the center could remain. So we did 2 things in response to Mr. Pennical's determination. First, we filed an appeal of the zoning determination to the Zoning Hearing Board, and the Zoning Hearing Board affirmed that determination. We took an appeal, and that appeal sits in the Common Pleas Court. The second thing we did was we filed an application for variances with the Zoning Hearing Board, which sought variances to allow the existing legally non-conforming conditions to remain on the property while we developed the rear 8 acres. We subsequently took a look at the existing legal conformities or non-conformities within the shopping center, and we looked at Mark's list of items that he said that we had to bring up to present-day regulations, and the purpose of that comparison was to see if there was any way that we could eliminate any of those existing nonconformities by bringing them into compliance with the FTD ordinance without jeopardizing the number of parking spaces within the shopping center. We need to maintain the number of parking spaces in the shopping center because of various leases, particularly with regard to the Whole Foods. That investigation enabled us to bring some of the existing nonconformities into compliance with the FTD ordinance without jeopardizing the parking spaces and therefore the leases. We then went to the Zoning Hearing Board. In fact, we amended our application before the Zoning Hearing Board, asking the Zoning Hearing Board only to grant the variances to allow the existing nonconformities that we could not modify. And my witness will get in and will give you, you'll see the details. The Zoning Hearing Board granted the variances that we requested, and I have marked as Exhibit A4 the Zoning Hearing Board's decision of March 28, 2018. As a result of the Zoning Hearing Board's grant of the variances, on March 29, 2018, we amended our conditional use application to include the plan upon which the variances that we had requested was based. Therefore, the amended conditional use application eliminated some of the existing nonconformities within the shopping center and reflects the variances that were granted to allow other existing nonconforming uses to remain. I want to make a draw your particular attention to the following. The proposed apartment building on the rear 8 acres remained the same as on the original conditional use plan, and Mr. Penical's various letters determined that the apartment project, as depicted on our plans, comply with the FTD ordinance. I have marked as Exhibit A5 the amended conditional use plan. I believe that it's basically the same plan that we have up on the board now, with the exception of some of the access changes that we're going to get into. The township, however, took an appeal from the zoning hearing board's grant of the variances because it had some concerns about the design of the existing accesses for the shopping center and traffic problems that exist on the fairway that are unrelated to the existing shopping center. So after the township filed the appeal, we reached out and we sat down with township staff, township's traffic consultant, Brian Keaveney from Pannoni, and 2 members of council to understand those concerns and to try and figure out a way to address those concerns. As a result of those discussions, we made some more modifications to the existing accesses, and those modifications are reflected on the concept plan that is in front of you, dated March 13, 2008. And I've had this plan marked Exhibit A6. Now, as we've said, my client owns the rear 8 acres. The shopping center is owned by another entity. There is a cross-easement agreement between the 2 parties that was approved by the township a number of years ago, and we have the right to make certain modifications to the shopping center. We have reviewed the modifications that we're going to get into with the owner of the shopping center, and with one exception, and we'll get into that, the owner of the shopping center is okay. We have to have some further discussions with regard to this intersection right here, where the proposal is to enlarge the median so that this entrance will be right in and right out only. So our plan includes that change, but we've had some feedback from the owner of the shopping center, and we're going to have some further conversations before you make a decision with regard to this plan. Either they're going to allow blocking off the left in, left out, or they're not, and we'll have to come back. So we have reviewed this concept plan with township staff, with Mr. Keaveney and our traffic engineer, Matt Hammond, and we believe that they are all satisfied that we've addressed the township's concern to the extent possible. And what we're suggesting is that if the township grants the conditional use approval that we're asking for, we would be willing to incorporate the access and parking modifications depicted on the concept plan into our preliminary and final land development plans that will have to be submitted. Of course, I got to work out this one last piece. With that explanation, I'd like to present my first witness. I know I've thrown an awful lot of history and information. Mr. Chairman, if there are any questions that anybody has about the background, I'd be glad to answer that before I bring my first witness, but that's up to the board.
Thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Are there any questions at this point from any commissioners of the solicitor, Mr. Kaplan? Hearing none?
Thank you.
Proceed, sir.
Thank you. Adam, can we have Adam sworn?
Clearly explained to him.
B as in boy, E-N-O-S-K-Y.
Mr. Benoski, if you turn to tab 7, is this a copy of your curriculum vitae?
Good.
Oh, that's great. I gave everybody but the witness the exhibit. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Please describe your educational background for the board.
I have a Bachelor of Science degree in landscape architecture, as well as
Want to make sure the microphone's on? Thank you.
Good job. Is that better?
Better.
As well as professional licenses to practice landscape architecture in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Ohio, North Carolina, New York, and West Virginia.
So I take it your profession is a landscape architect? And I think you said it, but you are a registered landscape architect in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yes, I am.
When did you obtain such registration?
1996.
And how long have you been a practicing landscape architect?
Since 1996.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am employed by Bowler Engineering. I am a partner with the firm, and I oversee all of the Pennsylvania offices.
And how long have you been employed by Bowler?
Over 16 years.
Now, as a registered landscape architect, are you permitted to prepare site plans?
Yes, I am.
I'd offer Mr. Benoski as an expert landscape architect in the field of site design, the plans that we have here.
President Lugar, I believe that should be granted. Mr. Benoski, I think, is well known to the board as well as to myself and to my colleague, Ms. Murley. He's been classified as an expert frequently in front of boards and zoning hearing boards.
Thank you, sir. Proceed, Mr. Kaplan.
Thank you. We've marked as Exhibit A3 Mr. Pennical's July 18, 2016 zoning determination. Can you explain to the board what the zoning determination was based upon as you understand it?
Certainly. The determination looked primarily at the existing shopping center, and the determination was that there are several existing nonconformities on the shopping center property. Mr. Pennical's opinion was that when anything was touched on the back portion of the property or even anything modified on the front, that all of the existing nonconformities would need to be brought into compliance with the current FTD ordinance or the appropriate zoning relief sought by the zoning hearing board. So his determination outlined what he felt were existing nonconformities.
Does the zoning determination identify any issues or areas of noncompliance with regard to the proposed apartments on the rear 8 acres?
No, it does not.
So all of the nonconformities were relating to what, the shopping center?
That's correct, the front shopping center.
Now, we have a plan that we've marked as Exhibit A8. That's the existing conditions plan. Let me see if I can bring that up. Can you identify this plan?
Certainly, this is a plan that we prepared that shows the existing conditions as they exist today for the front shopping center and the rear 8 acres, which is behind the shopping center.
Did you prepare this plan, or was the plan prepared under your direction?
It was prepared under my direction.
Now, I'm going to come back to Exhibit A5, which is the amended conditional use plan. Let me make sure I've been. Give me 1 second. Adam, is that the conditional use plan, the overall site plan?
That is the overall plan, conditional use plan that was submitted.
So this is the amended conditional use plan that was submitted with our amended conditional use application, is that correct?
Correct.
And did you prepare this plan as well?
Yes, I did.
Would you please go through the zoning officer's determination and explain to the board which items you were able to satisfy through the modifications shown on this amended conditional use plan?
Certainly, reading from...
Do you want to come up here and use the pointer?
Whatever the board would prefer, I can use the pointer here, or I could use the pointer on the...
Well, if you use this pointer here, it gets all of the screens.
Sure. So, reading from Mr. Pennicow's letter, July 18th, 2016, item number 1 relates to section 5046D and requires installation of crosswalks from building to building. So there's several areas that we've added crosswalks, starting here at the westernmost property. There's access and sidewalk that comes up that leads you to the front of the existing shopping center. And then heading to the east, we have crosswalks and sidewalks again to the first out parcel and then up to the front of the building, the existing shopping center, and then crosswalks from the fairway up to the out parcel located here, and then a couple other locations where we brought pedestrian access into the site. Item number 2 in the letter, it relates to section 5046F, which requires bicycle racks at the rate of 1 rack to accommodate 10 bicycles for every 250 surface parking stalls. Very hard to see on this plan, but we've added bike racks along the frontage of the existing shopping center, and then we also have bike racks out along the fairway, so we've met that requirement. We've actually exceeded that requirement. Item number 5 from the letter relates to section 5046K, which required that existing loading dock areas be screened. And we have an area behind the Whole Foods where the loading dock exists today. And there is screening with a proposed fence in this location from the adjoining property. Other areas where we have dumpster locations, and this comes up in another ordinance section, we've added dumpster enclosures at this location and then the location over here on the western side of the property. Item number 6 relates to section 5048B2D. Requires at least 10% of all surface parking areas be landscaped at a design rate that will allow at least 20% of all paved areas to be shaded within 5 years. So this is a pretty big one that we were able to accomplish through not only modifications to the plan, but we sought a variance to reduce the parking stall size, really to bring the stall size into conforming dimensions. Currently on the site, stall sizes range, predominantly they're 10 by 20 feet, 10 feet wide by 20 feet deep. And what we've done is we've proposed and we're granted the variance to go to a uniform 9 by 18. What that allowed us to do was bring the shopping center more in conformance with today's standards with parking stall size and actually add green space within the development. So as you can see in here, I'm pointing to some of the landscape islands. Landscape islands were added all along the frontage of the shopping center. There's some longitudinal landscape islands in here, and then end caps at the ends of the parking lot. So what existed mostly today as all paved areas, we're able to cut in some of those landscaped areas to comply or exceed this requirement. Item number 7, which relates to section 504C1 and 2. That has to do with streetscapings and sidewalks. It talks about benches, trash cans, planters, and again, bike racks. And that we've done all along the existing frontage of the fairway. Hard to see, but these dashed areas here are benches, trash cans, and then we've added bike racks in various locations at all of the prescribed rates. Item number 9 has to do with ordinance section 504C2, G, H, I, J, and K. And that really has to do with sidewalk dimensions, and sidewalk construction, as well as crosswalks. There's some redundancy in the ordinance with regarding crosswalks and sidewalks, but all the sidewalks along the frontage of the fairway, the sidewalks that we're bringing up into the site, as I mentioned here on the western access point, and then sidewalks throughout the parking field were all brought up to those standards. And then finally, item number 12, we included additional landscaping and hardscaping improvements with regard to ordinance sections 5048F and 5048G. And this.
Why don't you stay there, because you're going to have to go back to the plan again. Go ahead. Adam, you heard me in my opening say that following the zoning hearing board's grant of the variances, we met with township staff and the traffic consultants to discuss the township's concerns about the existing access configuration for the existing shopping center and made some further modifications to the existing site accesses to address those concerns. Now, we are going to have our traffic engineer, Matt Hammond, get up and get into the details of what's going on in the street, but you made a certain number of changes to the existing configuration within the shopping center. And I'd ask you to point them out.
Certainly. These related to the 4 access points, and I'm going to start on the western portion of the site, the existing access located here. In our original conditional use plan, we have this access coming in. We had multiple points of ingress and egress from the parking field to the west and to the east into that lane. We've actually modified that, which is in our concept plan, Mark, if you want me to bring that up.
Yeah, just, yeah, you've got it. That's the concept plan.
Correct.
They're very close.
So staying with that same access point, the western access point, if you'll notice, we've modified the westernmost parking areas so that there's no access points into this access drive on either side. So we've created a long throat and then there's going to be a proposed signal on the fairway. I'm not going to get into the specifics of the signal. Mr. Hammond from TPD will do that during his testimony. As we move down to the what I'll call the second access drive heading east on the fairway, this has remained the same. We come into the access drive here. As I mentioned before, part of the modifications with the parking stall size, we've modified the parking in this location so the access comes into what we're going to call a T intersection. So there's a landscape island here. It gives the motorist an opportunity to go to the right or to the left, as opposed to the existing condition where there was a straight shot up to the buildings. And then heading further to the east, the existing driveway in front of the Whole Foods, that remains as it was designed. However, this will be a signalized access, or being proposed to be a signalized access as well. And then the access to the eastern portion of the site in front of Whole Foods, access point stays the same location, and that will be a proposed right in, right out in the future condition.
Okay, let's go on to the plans for the proposed apartments. And I think you can use the same exhibit. You may want to move it around on the screen. Please explain to the board in some detail.
Excuse me, Mr. Kaplan, could you pull the microphone closer to you? Thank you.
Would you please explain to the board in some detail the proposed apartment development as it is depicted on it's both on the amended conditional use plan and on the concept plan that you have in front of you?
Sure. So as I had mentioned, the front of the site remains the existing shopping center. I had mentioned the westernmost access point, which is the main access to the apartment complex. Again, the long throat, the road that goes back behind the shopping center, and then a road that we're designing that's proposed to come up behind the shopping center into the rear 8 acres. It comes in a circular pattern across the front of the building. The building is shown in a dark gray. It looks like a reverse E, if you will, with a main access, a pedestrian access located here in the center of the building. And then, as I mentioned, the driveway comes around. There's an egress under the building here for parking on the eastern side of that building, and an ingress egress located here on the other corner. Again, vehicular access, and then we have a small parking area for visitors with a sidewalk and a crosswalk that would come into the building at the center. The roadway continues around to the west of the building. To the back, there's another opportunity to come into the parking structure here that is at one level higher than the area in the front of the building. And then that road goes around the back for emergency access with dumpster locations located here in the dumpster enclosure. A couple other things along the access drive I wanted to point out. There is a proposed future connection. This would be to Nobletown Center, which is our direct adjacent property owner to the west. We're not proposing that access drive, but the way we've designed the site and the way the grades work out, that connection could be made in the future. Coming back down to the front of or staying with the building, you'll see the areas in between the legs of the E. Those are proposed amenity spaces. They haven't been designed, but those would be courtyards, pool area, things of that nature for the residents. The building itself contains 5 levels of apartments, 244 units, and 2 levels of parking, and that would be beneath the building. So the building is what we call a podium-style building, where you park under the building, 2 stories of parking, and then apartments up above. The overall height is 75 feet. I'll get into a little bit about the height in a minute when we talk about some of the bonus provisions in the ordinance. And then some other things I wanted to point out. We have a large open space located here, which is a public open space, public green area in front of the building. The building also has some retaining walls surrounding it, and that's to create level areas or a terraced effect in the landscape to set the building into the side of the existing contour.
Now, you said when I asked you the question before about Mr. Penical's determination letter going back to 2016, that he pointed out no inconsistencies or violations of the zoning ordinance by the proposed apartment building. Has the apartment building changed since that time?
It has not. The design is exactly the same.
In your opinion, does the proposed apartment complex comply with all of the zoning requirements of the FTD ordinance?
Yes, it does.
So I think that brings us to the last zoning provision that requires further discussion at this time in the process, and that's the bonuses. I think it would be best if I let you explain to the board what is permitted by the FTD ordinance in the way of bonuses.
Certainly. So the FTD ordinance contains a section 5047, which allows an applicant to propose and basically site amenities for bonus provisions. And the bonus provisions, if you obtain the bonus provisions, allows you to increase building height, impervious coverage, non-residential floor area, and residential density.
And how many bonus points are required for the plan that you've described?
8 total bonus points.
And could you tell us how our client proposes to achieve the 8 bonus points?
Sure. So I'm looking at and talking about now Section 5047B in the FTD ordinance, which has a chart which outlines bonuses, proposed bonuses or bonus features that an applicant can provide to gain various points.
Adam, let me just interrupt you for 1 second. We have the FTD ordinance in the binder. It is exhibit number 2, if anybody wants to follow along. Go ahead.
Sure. So again, that chart that I'm referring to, item number 2 on the chart, the bonus feature is additional street/landscape amenities, and that's for 1 bonus point. What we're proposing there is in the open space that I had mentioned before in front of the apartment building, and then we have two smaller areas behind the shopping center, and then an existing area, plaza area in front of the shopping center. We are proposing to install various things like a gazebo and public art and amenities such as that for 1 bonus point. The next proposed bonus is item number 7, which has to do with building materials, and that's for 2 bonus points. And our architect is here this evening. He's going to talk a little bit more about it, but essentially that provision is the use of decorative masonry for more than 50% of all proposed building facades. Again, that'll be reviewed a little bit further in detail by our architect, but that is worth, or the value is at 2 bonus points. Item number 9 in the chart, the proposed bonus is for structured parking for a single use, and that's for 2 bonus points. And the feature, the standard for the feature is structured parking that provides at least 50% of the required minimum parking spaces for the development site qualifies in any structure, and number 2, in any structured parking facility, at least 15% of the parking spaces must be available to the public. So for this use, we are providing 100% of the parking within the parking structure, and 15% of those sites will be available for public use. And then again, referring to the chart, item number 14 has to do with green infrastructure, sustainable stormwater management. And this is for 3 bonus points. And essentially, there's a lot of things that you can do with this, but the use of recycled rainwater systems for collection and reuse. And as part of this project, we are proposing rainwater reuse, capture and reuse for irrigation system on site. So we'd be capturing rainwater, which falls on the building roof, and putting that into a collection system for site irrigation. So there's another bonus provision,
Yeah.
item number 11, which talks about off-site traffic improvements. As Mark had mentioned, and I alluded to a little bit before, we are proposing some proposed signals and modification on the fairway. Mr. Hammond from TPD, our traffic engineer, is going to get into more detail about that, but that is a bonus provision that is worth 3 bonus points.
And we'll get into that with Matt Hammond. And now the last part of this portion of our application is with regard to the conditional use standards that are set forth in the ordinance and would be applicable to this proposed development. Does the FTD ordinance contain any conditional use standards that are applicable to this application?
Yes, they do. It is section section 504(3)(c) of the FTD ordinances, specifically addresses conditional use approval. And I'm going to read it to make sure it's clear. Again, item number C, conditional use approval requires evidence of conformance with the express standards set forth in the FTD. The applicant is not required to demonstrate conformance with non-zoning ordinance or regulations at the conditional use hearing. However, it does not waive the need for subdivision and land development approval. Conditional use approval shall be subject to the conditions based on the evidence presented at the hearing or such conditions accepted by the applicant.
Now, the zoning officer has already determined that the proposed development complies with the express standards of the FTD ordinance. That is, other than the existing nonconformities within the shopping center for which variances have been granted. Do you agree with that statement?
That's correct.
And as you previously stated, you revised the conditional use plan to bring some of the existing nonconformities into compliance with the FTD ordinance,
That's correct.
and we obtained variances to allow the other nonconformities to continue to exist.
That's correct.
Are there any areas where the proposed development, as depicted on the amended conditional use plan, does not comply with the FTD ordinance for which variances were not granted?
No.
Sorry about that one. That's it. That's my testimony from Mr. Bonoski, subject to cross-examination. Mr. Clark?
I have no questions from Mr. Bonoski. If any board members have questions, this would be the time to ask him those questions.
Commissioner Myers, you have a question?
Thank you. Forgive me, I'm confused about the parking. The green space area there, which is like a semicircle, and then those parking spots there, you said they were guest spots, is that correct?
Visitor spots. So
well-
if you were going to come to
The same thing?
well, if you were going to come to the front entrance and stop in, visit, if you were going to rent an apartment, you would park there. Guests can park in the parking garage. So as I mentioned, there's multiple points of entry underneath the building to park.
So for the structure, what is the total number of parking places that is exclusive to the structure?
I want to make sure I get this number right. 491 spaces.
Okay.
And that complies with the ordinance requirement for 2 spaces per 2 units.
My other confusion is, what is considered the front of the building, the front facade?
Our architect will go through that in more detail, but this is
Okay.
the front facade that faces the fairway, and then that's the main entrance located there.
Okay, so the front of the building faces the back of the shopping center?
And faces the fairway, yes, the main street for
Okay.
access, yeah.
But there's an elevation difference, is there not?
There's quite a big elevation
No
difference.
judgment, I'm just asking.
Anything else, Commissioner Myers? Okay, Commissioner Spiegelman, and then Commissioner Gillespie, and then Commissioner Vice President Klein.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Bonoski, just to be clear, those 2 the two parking garage levels, are both of those subterranean? Are either of them subterranean? Are they semi-underground? Like,
So the answer is the grade varies around the building.
Yeah.
So as you come in from the front, you're coming in, obviously you're coming in flat into the bottom of the building. So as you drive back into the back of it, you'll slowly be underground. And then as you kind of come up to the next floor, in the way back, you're partially underground. So most of the parking is buried except for the front, which is exposed on the bottom level.
all right, thank you.
Thank you. My office is right there at the end where your new road is going to be. And I'm just curious, first of all, I will be happy to see organization of that parking lot. That is one of the scariest parking lots I've ever been in, I will tell you right now. We sneak in the back way. Anyway, how are you going to differentiate that road, considering the way this parking lot, everybody, it's, it could be bumping cars in there, but.
Specifically here?
Yes, how are you
I
going
can
to
zoom in.
delineate that, like, to keep these people from just driving all over like they do now?
I'm going to try to zoom in for you. It might be easier
Okay.
to.
We would like, we'd be happy if there was a stop sign right at the end of the building there. People come, they just,
Yeah, so your existing condition, it is a little bit of a free-for-all, if you will. So what we're doing here, and it might be a little bit hard to see, but there's a landscape island, curb landscape island,
okay.
all the way up.
okay.
So no cars can come in from the adjoining parking here. Same would be on the western
All right.
side. That's a landscape island with a sidewalk all the way up. So the parking here, to the west, you would come in, and it creates a dead-end parking over on the side here, but you don't allow people to come in. So you've really created this throat or this long dedicated drive aisle. And then when you come to the stop sign located here, you have the opportunity to turn right into the shopping center or to go straight and make the left to come back around. And it's essentially a three-way stop. So we're bringing that intersection basically to create a real intersection, whereas now you can kind of go anywhere you want. and it's
Believe me, they
curbed.
do. They
Right.
just drive through.
And it's curbed now, so you can't,
can't.
even where there was parking spaces, when people weren't parked there, cars would just kind of go wherever they wanted. With the curbed islands, now we're creating that dedicated drive and directing the traffic.
Now, but behind the building there, because that's exactly where we are, so those parking spaces that are behind the building along there, they'll be gone. That's where the road is.
Correct. So the road comes up behind the shopping center. There's a striped area here, which would be for temporary loading and unloading.
Right.
And then there's again, a curbed island with landscaping and a sidewalk for pedestrian access all the way up to the back.
So we could park in that other, that's the far end parking lot.
And then
Okay.
this parking lot it's there today, but
it's
we're
existing,
we're
yeah.
making modifications to it, enlarging it, and putting landscaped islands in to really kind of bring it up to
That is such an improvement right there.
yeah.
Thank you.
Vice President Klein.
Can you explain, you talked about the structured parking would have 15% of public spaces. Will the parking garage be open all the time?
Yeah, the parking garage would be open for that 15%, so it would be accessible to the public. It
So the
would not
parking
be
garage will
closed.
not have controlled access?
I don't know that the details have been worked out about how that will be controlled, but there will be provisions for parking for the public.
Will somebody else be able to answer that, Mark?
Steve, I don't know. I don't know that we've gotten to that level of detail. Fred had, yeah, I think our architect
Okay.
will be able to answer that.
Mr. Benoski, can you go through the plan and explain the locations and heights of retaining walls involved in the project? Or I assume that would be something in your bailiwick?
It is. I can be honest with you, I don't have all the specific details of those. Generally, there's retaining walls. I'll give you ranges. I can go to the grading plan and give you more specifics, but just in general, there's a retaining wall that comes up along the back of the shopping center, and then that follows along the roadway and the sidewalk all the way up and around. So as the roadway comes up, the grade changes and you're coming up, I want to say it's about 20 feet higher here. So these walls would range, anywhere from, a couple feet high up in the neighborhood of 20 feet, especially along this access drive. And then along the western property line, we have a large retaining wall that really follows the road back and around. And then so there's retaining walls located along this access drive here and then in the back. And as I had mentioned, we're having a separation here to create a terraced effect so that there's a landscaped area in between these two walls and then around the back side.
So on that back side and the left-hand side of the E, that retaining wall, the low end is on your side of the property. The bottom of the wall is on your side of the property, the top of the wall is towards the adjacent property. Is that
Correct.
correct?
That's
Or
correct.
to the back of the property, I should say also. Okay. Just lost my question. I did have another question. I'm sure I'll think of it sooner or later.
Commissioner Thompson.
Going back to the parking lot reconfiguration at the lower left corner of the plan. Yeah, that dead-end lot over there. People are going to park, they're going to cut across the grass onto that sidewalk that's to the right. Is there a buffer or anything like that to keep pedestrians from crossing over that drive lane into the parking lot to go over towards the shopping center?
There is a sidewalk that comes up here and then a crosswalk that brings you up right to the side of the or the existing sidewalk, which you could get across the whole frontage.
But there's no buffer to restrict pedestrian movement going across that drive lane?
There's a landscaped area between the curb line and the sidewalk located here, along here. But
Do we know
there's
what's
no
going in
physical-
there? What kind of landscaping's going in there?
We haven't gotten that far with the type of landscaping. I would suspect we'd have some sort of hedge material in there.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I just thought of my two questions. So has the plan, have you had any meetings with the fire marshal's office, and have you had any conversations about access for this property with the fire marshal's office?
I don't think there's been.
No, we have. We had, going back 2 years ago, we had a number of meetings with the fire marshal's office. And in fact, Larry Mateo and Mark Penicow were in those meetings. And we explained the access to the fire marshals. Steve, you're aware of this, I believe, because we've had this discussion. We have no other access. We would all like to have a second access. And what Adam demonstrated here before, all the way over to the left, this is a one-dimensional plan, but as you know, this is really three-dimensional. The proposed future access point, Adam, can you point that out? That sits, I'll say two-thirds, a half a way up, two-thirds the way up the hill on the Noble Plaza parking lot. Our second level has been designed to be exactly equal with that. And Larry asked us 2 years ago to go to the owners of the shopping center and to ask them if they would give us an easement for emergency access only. That shopping center was owned by a big national shopping center chain. They were interested in whatever development they could do, and Fred spent some time trying to get that permission. Our discussions with your staff and Larry when he was here, somewhere along the line, Noble Plaza is going to come in and ask for something. And with your help, we will be able to get, it's nothing more than a bollard and a breakaway. It's not a big deal. It wouldn't impose a lot on them. But we have no way of forcing them to do that other than to do the design that we did so that we're at the same level. And we discussed that with the fire marshal. It's obvious to all of us that we would like to have that second emergency access. We hope somewhere along the line between the township and our ownership that we'll be able to make some kind of deal with the owner of the shopping center. Fred, let me ask you a question. Is the owner of the shopping center sold? Is that one of the majors that was just sold, or is it still?
They've been for sale.
Mark, I'm going to ask, Fred's not, Mr. Snow is not under oath right at the moment, so if perhaps we can.
Right, hold on.
Okay, well, you see what I'm sorry, Mike. The major, a number of the major shopping center REITs have been in play. I believe, I may be wrong, but I believe they may have been in play. We're having trouble getting somebody responsible to talk to. And I guess that's it. We need the township's help.
Okay, I'm aware of the conversations. I wanted that on the record, that's all. My last question relates to, can you go through and explain the two things, the pedestrian walkways and pedestrian crosswalks that are being inserted into the parking lot for the shopping center? Because as Commissioner Gillespie said, that parking lot is a free-for-all, and walking across there, you could take your life in your own hands. And some of the improvements that would be made to the shopping center. And my second part of that, also the relocation of light standards that are in the middle of the middle of the drive lanes, and where those are going to be relocated to.
Sure.
Hold on one second. Steve, would it be helpful if we put up the existing conditions plan or everybody knows the shopping center, I guess, but if you'd like to see the existing conditions plan, we have it there, and there is a big, big difference between the existing and what we're proposing.
You guys can present it any way you want to. I would like that for the record.
Let me pull up the existing condition, and then I'll just briefly go through it. Let me just zoom in here for a minute. This is the existing conditions plan, and I think more than anything, a lot of what's going to help the access, a lot of the pedestrian and vehicular conflicts, is the fact that we're proposing realigning a lot of these drives. We're proposing curbed islands, whereas now, this is the first entrance in, the first westernmost entrance in, and if you notice, you come in here, and it's wide open asphalt. There's striping, but there's no, differentiation between the drive aisle and the areas where either pedestrians would be or cars would be. This is the area where I just went through in detail the long islands, the throat that we've added. Right now it's just wide open pavement. Moving to the second access point, I'm not sure how I get rid of that. Again, you come in here off the fairway, and there's cars parked right here. There's no curbed islands. There's nowhere to direct you. Being on the site many times over the years, cars come in and drive right over where the cars would be parked in the parking spaces. Traveling further south, again, we're not modifying this in great detail, but you can see how it comes in, no differentiation between where the car's parked and where the drive aisle is, and then to the easternmost access point, again, kind of just driving in, no curbed islands, no gore striping of any kind. So that's the existing conditions. Now, going back to the concept plan, again, I'll start with the westernmost access point. This is the one I went through in great detail. You can see it's a channelized access point. We have crosswalks being proposed on the fairway, which Mr. Hammond will talk a little bit more about. We have a sidewalk across our frontage here, and we have sidewalk that comes in, crosswalks that cross the drive aisle, away from the fairway, in closer to the shopping center, a crosswalk located here to get you onto the sidewalk. So you would be coming off the sidewalk, coming off of the fairway sidewalk up into the site, not only to the shopping center, but then providing crosswalks, ADA accessible walkway, all the way up to the residential development in the back. And then staying in the back, crosswalk across the drive aisle here with a sidewalk getting you into the parking spaces that are in the back now, and again, enhancing those. Kind of moving through the plan, staying interior, you can see curbed island located here. Again, that channelizes cars. Cars can't drive through that because it'll be a raised concrete curbed island planted along the frontage. Large landscaped island located here, directing the vehicles across the frontage. And then as we go across to the east, again, curbed landscape island located here, and then the island located here. We have crosswalks coming across, the sidewalk that comes down along the existing outparcel building, and the sidewalk continues with crosswalks here and a sidewalk that brings you out to the fairway. As I had mentioned in the existing condition, right now, as you come in the second drive, it's wide open. There's no curbed islands. There's no direction in here. You can just kind of fly up through here. What we've provided, and as we've restriped this, we're providing a curbed island here so that vehicles come in and they can either make a right or they can make a left. Further down east on the site, long longitudinal island here with end caps. We call end caps at the end of parking spaces, both at the north and the south. Again, to direct vehicles, keep vehicles from driving through the parking areas. And I'll just continue down, additional landscape islands located here in front of the plaza area. And then in front of the outparcel in the center of the site, again, a sidewalk and crosswalk across the drive aisle that's internal to the shopping center, and then continuing on with various curb islands throughout here in front of the Whole Foods. And then the areas that are located in front of the Whole Foods, these are striped areas. So there's no more parking where you're at the end of a drive aisle. So if somebody gets out of a car, they're standing in a drive aisle. So we've protected all those areas in the front here. Your other question was regarding light pole standards. There are a lot of light pole standards that are in the center of drive aisles or in parking lots. As you can imagine, as we restripe this and relocate parking, some of those don't necessarily line up. What's difficult to see, and there's a little bit of a differentiation here, as an example right here, there's these are light pole symbols. The existing is located here. It's in the drive aisle. We're proposing to shift that slightly and put it in a landscape island. That holds true for just about all of these. There's one located here. We're shifting it and putting it in an island. Even in the area that is located over by the main entrance here, certain light pole standards, again, this would be in a drive aisle. We're putting it into a curbed island. In all cases, all those light standards that are in drive aisles will be in curbed islands or painted islands out of the drive aisles.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Clark, before Mr. Banowski sits down and Mr. Kaplan calls his next expert witness, should we allow the public to ask questions of this witness pertaining to his presentation before we move on to the next?
Only those members of the public who request and are granted party status should be given the opportunity to question Mr. Banowski. All members of the public should be given the opportunity to make public comment prior to the board making its decision. But only those who request and are granted party status can question the witness.
Can you explain to the public what party status requirement is?
Good.
Party status essentially means that an individual who has a more direct and approximate interest in the application in front of the board beyond that of just a regular not, again, a time to make public comment or statements, but to ask the witness specific and direct questions.
So it would be appropriate then, at this time, if there are any residents here who want to claim party status and want to ask questions of Mr. Banowski, please feel free to come up to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and keep your comments or questions limited to 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just have a couple questions.
First, we're going to state your name and your
Okay,
address for the
okay. Yeah, Herb McMahon, 1046 Huntington Road. Herb McMahon, McMahon, and it's 1046 Huntington Road. I overlook the,
where your property is approximately how close to the subject property?
yeah, I was just going to say, my property overlooks the right-of-way property, and I was just going to ask if they,
Mr. McMahon, we
yeah.
have to get through this initial process to
Yes.
grant you party status.
Okay.
So your property is located where in relation to the subject property?
If you look up to the northeast of this, you'll see right-of-way, and my property overlooks the right-of-way property.
Would you be able to estimate approximately how far you are from the property in question?
As the crow flies, probably, I would say maybe 4 or 5 blocks, maybe 6 blocks.
Mr. Kaplan, do you have any objection to Mr. McMahon being granted party status?
I do, but I'm just going to waive that and let him ask the question.
So Mr. McMahon should be granted party status, and respectfully, Commissioner Luker, once he is granted party status, there isn't a time limit on how long he can ask his questions for. This is not public comment, so Mr. McMahon can ask questions as long as they remain relevant to the matter at hand, and they are questions and not statements. So,
And if you could keep them brief, please.
I'm going to
Thank
be
you.
super brief. All I wanted to know is if they can point out the surrounding properties. If you can just point on this map where right-of-way is, where the Bed Bath & Beyond is, where Trader Joe's is, so we can get an idea of proximity to the building.
I'm not sure that we can do this. We can answer it. I think we have an aerial, and let me see if that helps. Which one?
I think that one might do it. The one down, one
Yeah,
down, that one.
existing aerial, yeah.
and Mr. Kaplan, in light of the fact that Mr. Banowski is under oath and you're not, perhaps Mr. Banowski can answer those questions.
Oh, I'm not going to try.
Okay.
I'm just going to try and
You're doing a great job with the computer.
I am having so much fun. I usually need my granddaughter to do this kind of stuff for me.
Perfect.
So this is an aerial photograph of the site. In the center of the site, you'll see the words "the fairway," and the fairway runs or is parallel to the sheet. And in the center of the sheet is the existing Baderwood Shopping Center. Whole Foods is located here. Rydell Park is located here. You can see on the map, it's called Noble Circle, which in the aerial, it's not built yet. So this is a little bit older. And then you have Noble Town Center, which is located to the left of the fairway, of Baderwood Shopping Center, and then further is 611. So I don't know all of the buildings, but I think you can see from the aerial where we are, and then I'll just outline our property, the back acreage, 8 acres where we have the proposed apartment is located, again, behind Baderwood Shopping Center, the parking here, which is Nobletown, and then up to the back, and then down, it comes kind of at an angle in the back.
So if you go back to the schematic of your proposal, and you go clear on up to the north, Is this section right here, is that the right of way?
I believe so,
So
yes.
it comes
Yes.
down, clear on down like that?
Yep,
Okay. And then, how about up here? This is also right of way?
correct.
Okay. And then, coming back down south, where would the Trader Joe's be? The Trader Joe's is up in this area?
I think it's up further off of the screen.
Okay. I guess the Bed Bath & Beyond would be down in this area? I'm just trying to get a feel for what's surrounding you.
Let me go back to the aerial.
Is this leading to a question, Mr. McMahon? Or-
I just, it goes towards density, I think, and their property, if you look, it goes really, really close to the right-of-way property. I just wanted to get a feel for what it's gonna look like when it's done.
Well, we do have some artists, architects renderings, and one of them coincidentally is from the back. So if you would allow me to put the architect
Okay.
on, I think that may help.
That's all I wanted to see, is
Okay.
where it is in proximity to different things.
All right.
Yeah.
I think it might behoove us to hold off any more questions and just move to your next expert witness, and then we'll address the comments as they
Can I get the,
become necessary. Go ahead.
can I get the,
He has it on a thumb drive.
oh, does he? Oh, okay. Better yet. Let me bring Mr. Chappelle up. No, I'm okay. Scott is on a thumb, I didn't think he had it on a thumb drive. What?
Mr. Clark, does he have to be sworn in?
Yes, he does.
Go ahead, you do it.
Okay. Okay, we can start with,
I think you want to do the renderings.
yeah, we can start with that if you like.
Okay. So can we have him identified and sworn?
Raise your right hand. Solemnly swear testimony about to give the truth, whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Your full name is spelled, please.
My name is Charles Chappelle. Last name is spelled Chappell.
Chuck, come over here closer to the microphone. And why don't, instead of me asking you a lot of questions about your drawings,
Sure.
why don't, you've heard the questions, try and help the board and the neighbors understand what the proposal is. I do want to make one caveat. These are artist renderings. The buildings are close to what we're talking about. The landscaping and all that is just random. So I don't want to make any false representations in that regard. So with that caveat, tell us about what you plan.
Okay. As you can see here, this is actually the entrance. One of the questions came up earlier. The entrance of the building as you come up to the drive.
Sir,
This-
could you have the microphone closer to you?
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Very sorry about that.
And you're going to need to speak louder.
Yes, no problem. Okay. As you come up the entrance drive, this is actually the front of the building, the main lobby entrance, where you actually see where the garage entrance is here and a secondary garage entrance here. This is the drop-off, visitors leasing area, and here again is the entrance to the main part of the building. You can see the building in general is made up of, we're looking for 50% decorative masonry, as well as a cementitious panel board on much of the building in general. We're looking at masonry accents, a variety of decorative masonry along the perimeter of the building in its entirety. This begins to give you an idea of the front of the building. You'll begin to see, in these perspectives, you'll begin to see how the grade changes from the front of the building to the back of the building. This is actually the secondary perspective. It's overlooking, hold on one second to make sure. It's overlooking the Nobletown Center. So again, you begin to see here, you'll see the entrance. This is where actually the amenity courtyard is. Again, you'll see that all the masonry actually surrounds the building. We're trying to provide that 50% of decorative masonry around the totality of each of the building plans, all the way around the building. Again, you begin to see some of the grade change in how it's actually, the retaining walls are actually landscape buffers that we're actually using that, so. Now, this is actually the third perspective we're actually providing. Again, this is actually a view from, or facing Noble Circle, in essence. So all the houses along this edge would have this look. So you begin to see the top of the retaining walls, but again, we're using the masonry, decorative masonry around the perimeter of the building to, again, to provide a rich feeling, rich materials around the entire building. The building, in essence, has 4 facades, 4 faces, 4 fronts.
Chuck, can I ask you this? Is this the perspective that Mr.
To the microphone, Mr. Kaplan.
Sure. Is this the perspective that Mr. McMahon was looking for?
It is. That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Let's see. And again, these are actually straight-on elevations to kind of show the masonry content, the decorative masonry in general. You begin to see the front elevation or the entrance elevation. We're providing 55% masonry. The secondary elevation, it's actually facing on Noble Town Center, is actually 48%. The rear elevation, in essence, we're providing 51%, and the masonry facing Noble Circle is actually 48%. All 4 of those sides together average of 50.5% of masonry around the total building, so.
That was the purpose of his testimony, to show you our concepts at this point and to show that we meet the 50% masonry requirement for the bonus provisions. If anybody has any questions for Mr. Chappelle.
Now, did you want to continue presentation, asking your expert witness questions before we?
That was the,
That was it?
that was the
Okay.
extent of what we needed him for.
Okay.
I have one more witness. I have my traffic engineer.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Thompson.
2 questions for you.
Certainly.
Can you talk about the retaining wall on the west side of the building, about where the Bed Bath & Beyond is? Are we, standing down in the Bed Bath & Beyond parking lot, are we looking up at a retaining wall? Yeah, that view right there. Is that a vertical wall?
A certain portion of it actually is retaining along this edge, along this back edge. But a certain portion of this wall is actually retaining wall, but there's also a grade change here where this is a connection to that Noble Town Center. So there's a little bit of a change in here, a grade change. Again, we're working through how this wall is kind of pertained. It's part of the site plan application that will be coming. So we're working through those details.
Okay, so you don't know how tall that wall is yet?
I don't at this moment, no.
Okay, all right. And then my other question was about with the green roof surfaces, which is another bonus credit that I think you had talked about earlier. The plans show green roofs in the public plazas down below. Is there any green roof up on the top? How do we get to the 50%?
I don't think we talked about green roofs.
Oh, okay, so you're not actually seeking that one?
The sustainability item we've talked about is collecting the stormwater and collecting the stormwater
Okay,
and
so you're not going for
reusing
12.
the stormwater.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Okay. Any more questions?
Any other questions? Vice President Klein.
Yeah, so I guess I want to understand, I understand from Mr. Kaplan that these are schematic drawings or concept drawings, but the bonus, one of the bonus provisions that you're counting on for the density bonus relates to the 50%, which you just went through. And I realize that these elevations may change in the actual final iteration of this building when it comes to permitting. How does that process, and maybe this is a question for our solicitor, or you guys can decide who wants to answer it, but how does that process get verified? And does that happen at the staff level? And if there's a dispute, what happens if there's a dispute in the calculation of the amount of masonry? I would like to understand how that process happens, because I realize that we're looking at this, you've done the calculations, but that may change.
All right, so let me answer that in 2 ways if I can. First of all, we're using hardy board for the other percentage of the materials. you know Hardy Board as well as I do, Steve. It's the state-of-the-art product. It is, what's the word you use, cementatious material. Whether that complies, whether that satisfies the masonry or not, I don't know. But there's a very simple way. We need the bonuses, and if we don't get the bonuses, the building that we're going to come in for our building permit, we're not going to get the building permit. So the simple answer is that it's going to be decided at the one time when it can be decided, and that's at building permit. And we will have to demonstrate that we meet the masonry requirement.
And my question to our solicitor is, what happens if there's a dispute as to the calculation or the material being used?
I agree with Mr. Kaplan that when the plans and the building permits are applied for, that's when this determination is made. If there is a dispute where our staff is saying it's 47% and the developer is saying it's 52%, and it's not able to be resolved internally, this would probably be something that could go to the Board of Building Code Appeals, or alternatively to the Court of Common Pleas, although it would seem to be ripe for the Board of Building Code Appeals to resolve a matter like this.
Let me give you the practical answer. If there's a dispute, we're going to add more masonry. We're not going to get into a fight at that point. We'll just add more masonry.
Understood. Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? If not, Mr. Kaplan, your next witness, please.
Yes, I'd like to have Matt Hammond, please. Yeah, take it, thank you. What did I do?
I do. Matthew, M-A-T-T-H-E-W, Hammond, H-A-M-M-O-N-D. Thank you.
Which one do you want, Matt?
Amended conditional use.
Pardon me?
I'm going to use the amended conditional use plan. Second one from the top. Not concept. Yeah, that should be good. Concept plan. You said amended conditional use.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's right, okay.
Concept plan?
You may also want to use the aerial and blow it.
Yeah, this one should work. Let me zoom out. Here, I'll zoom out.
Mr. President?
Yes, sir.
Matt Hammond is our traffic engineer. I can go through all of the questions. I think a lot of people know Matt, and I'd offer him as an expert in traffic engineering rather than going through the litany of questions, if that's okay with you.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Matt, let me do this. You've been involved in...
Please use the microphone, Mr. Kaplan. Thank you.
Matt, you've been involved in our discussions with the township since the appeals were taken. And rather than me asking you a whole series of questions, why don't you tell the story of what went on and what you've come up with and your interaction with Brian Keaveney and the staff, and I think it'll go a lot quicker than me asking you a series of questions. If I think you missed something, I'll interrupt you and try and
Thank you.
Sure. So, as Mr. Kaplan mentioned, I've been involved in this project for a number of years. I was made aware earlier this year of some concerns that the township staff and the township traffic engineer raised with respect to the existing access. There have been anecdotes of issues relating to the fairway, the operation of the existing access points, and obviously there's even discussion with respect to how the existing parking lot and the traffic flow throughout the site operates today. So based on those discussions and my understanding of what some of those concerns were, I was tasked with the job of determining what improvements could be made to help alleviate some of those existing concerns as they relate to the shopping center's access today, keeping in mind that we are proposing to develop the rear of the site for an apartment building. My initial concept plan that I had prepared looked specifically at the access points along the fairway. And as everyone is aware of today, and I won't belabor this, but if you know the access to the Betawood Shopping Center, and I'll go from the west to the east, the first access point you have here is a right-in, right-out by virtue of the fact there's an existing median along the fairway. Again, traveling east, the second access has been discussed as a full access driveway today. When I say full access, I mean right in, right out, left in, left out. There's a break in the median that exists there today. Again, moving further east, you have another driveway, what I'll call the main access to the Whole Foods. Again, there's another full access driveway allowing all movements in and out of that access point. And then finally, the driveway to the east, again, is another full movement driveway. So as it exists today, you have one right-in, right-out driveway on the western side of the property and 3 full movement driveways on the fairway. In addition, as far as pedestrian access is concerned, and I'll show in these approximate locations, there are 2 existing mid-block crosswalks that allow you to traverse from the south side of the fairway to the north side and vice versa. And they're mid-block crosswalks because they don't exist at any intersections and they are essentially uncontrolled. So when I looked at the access, I looked at what we could do in order to facilitate some improvements there. Knowing that based on the analysis and the studies that we have done to date, that the apartments themselves didn't really necessitate the need for these improvements, but based on the fact there are a number of concerns raised, we looked at what we could do. The first concept that we had come up with was modifications to the access, and again, starting from the west side, was to convert this existing right-in, right-out driveway to a full movement signalized driveway, allowing lefts in, lefts out, rights in, rights out, as well as providing for a signalized access point to the existing automobile dealership to the south side of the fairway. The next access point would be a right-in, right-out driveway serving the Betawood Shopping Center by virtue of adding a median, would also allow a left-in from the fairway into the existing car dealership driveway. That's primarily, today, their full access driveway, so we did not want to negatively impact them to the extent feasible. Obviously, they would now have a full access signalized driveway on the western side of their property. Again, going east, there's a full access driveway that exists in this location today. What we would look to do was to signalize that driveway. So again, have a second signal at that intersection. Originally, when we looked at the plan, that access point we had looked at just providing a full access driveway in that location and no signalization. But I'll get into the reason why we've now shown that to be a second signal. And then the final fourth driveway to the east, we would modify to provide for right-in, right-out only movements by virtue of adding the median in the center. So we went from a right-in, right-out driveway and 3 full access driveways to 2 right-in, right-out driveways and 2 signalized driveways on the fairway.
Matt, let me just interrupt. You heard the caveat that I said about our discussions with the owner of the shopping center, that he has some concern about taking away his left turn in and left turn out. We will have to have that discussion with him. And I know we haven't talked about this, but what do you think the effect of the 2 signalized intersections on either side of that existing driveway will ultimately have on the habits of the patrons who come and go to this center?
So I think by the fact that we have the 2 signalized access points, they are 2 signalized means of ingress and egress. There are significant improvements that are being made to the throat of the westernmost driveway. So I think by adding the two signals, you will attract many more of the existing patrons to the center, as well as the residents to the future apartment complex through those two signalized access points. In addition, those signalized access points will create gaps in traffic on the fairway. So without having analyzed this, my opinion would be is if ultimately that driveway had to be revised back to a full access driveway, that I think it would see less traffic than it does today by the fact that you have the two signals. You would probably, you would be able to create the gaps, and you would see more traffic utilizing those signals to get on to the fairway or exit onto the fairway or enter from the fairway in a more safe and efficient manner. But getting back, so I prepared a concept plan. I submitted that concept plan to Mr. Keaveney, the township's traffic engineer, for his review. He had reviewed the concept plan and offered some comments. That was back in July of this past year. A few of his comments related to the throat of the driveway at the westernmost access point. As Mr. Benoski had stated, prior to that, we had basically shown a full access signalized driveway and still allowed for cross movements in that driveway. He had asked if we could provide a more defined throat and eliminate some of those cross access maneuvers, which the latest plan, as I am referring to now.
Matt, let me interrupt you. Just to point out, would you look at exhibit number 10 and tell me if that's Brian Keaveney's email to which you are referring to?
Yes, it is. That is July 26, 2018, correct. So you'll see the first comment that was made was, again, relating to the throat of the driveway, which, again, has been revised and is now basically improved to comply with the comment made by Mr. Keaveney. The second item that he had asked us to look at was the possibility of relocating the proposed signal at this westernmost driveway one driveway over or towards the east. And if not, could we look at the possibility of a second signal on the fairway? I had concerns with the provision of a traffic signal in this location here and moving the proposed signal over one driveway to the east due to the fact that this driveway here, as I'm referring to the westernmost driveway, in my opinion, would primarily serve not only the Baderwood Shopping Center as it exists today, but also obviously would be the main access point to and from the apartment complex to the rear. So I would like to keep the traffic signal at that location. So because of that, we looked at the possibility of a second signal. And the most logical spot for that signal is at the third driveway, or the driveway immediately in front of the Whole Foods Market. And one of the main reasons for that was that we did not want to propose a signal at the easternmost driveway, as we felt it would negatively affect the existing access points to the residential community to the east. So we want to try to move it away so that we didn't have an access point or a signalized access with traffic backing up past those existing residential driveways. The next comment that Mr. Keaveney had asked us to look into was whether or not we should provide for what's referred to as a rapid red flashing beacon at the existing mid-block crosswalks. And what I mentioned to Mr. Keaveney was that the plan, as is shown here with two access points, actually allows us to get rid of those mid-block crosswalks and bring those two crosswalks into the traffic signal proposed at that second driveway, or that second signalized access point at Whole Foods. It allows us to provide for crosswalks, for handman countdown timers, ADA ramps, and basically allows the pedestrian to cross at the signal as you would find at any other signalized intersection through the area, which provide actually a much safer situation than having mid-block crosswalks in between traffic signals.
Matt, tell us about, identify your traffic study. I believe it's behind tab 11.
Sure.
And if you have finished with your description of the access changes, could you give us a summary of what your investigation was and what your conclusions are?
Sure, and just before I get there, one other final comment that Mr. Keeney had made was he had asked us to look at providing more of a defined area for the left turn movement proposed into the car dealership driveway, as I'm referring to in this area here on the plan, to ensure that no illegal lefts in or lefts out could be made. What you see on this plan is a result of that comment and the change that was made to make it more of a chute, to allow for that vehicle that wants to make a left in, for it to be virtually impossible for anyone to make a left out onto the fairway from the car dealership driveway. Mr. Keemney had also, as part of those comments, had asked if we were going to provide a traffic study that would depict the proposed changes to the access points and analyze those changes and how they would operate along the fairway. Tab 11 is a traffic impact study, last revised August 24th, 2018, which was prepared by myself. It was submitted back to Mr. Keaveney on September 4th with a revised concept plan, which addressed Mr. Keaveney's comments, what I just mentioned. That traffic study talks about the existing access points, which I had mentioned, as well as the proposed changes that we had talked about and had come up with respect to the changes to the access points and also the changes to the pedestrian facilities through the area. What it shows is there's a drastic improvement with respect to how those access points operate, and then the overall safety along the fairway, not only for vehicular traffic, but for pedestrian traffic as well. That is, again, was provided to Mr. Keaveney in September for his review. We did have a follow-up conversation / meeting with township staff, as well as Mr. Keaveney, to talk about the revised study as well as the revised concept plan. And I don't want to speak for Mr. Keaveney, but what I can tell you is that he felt that the improvements that we are proposing to the access points were a significant improvement to the vehicular traffic flow as well as the pedestrian safety along the fairway. And that is his opinion. We had provided all of the improvements that we could provide along that area in order to provide for that significant safety improvement.
I have no further, he's completed his presentation, and anybody wants to ask questions, please do.
Comments from commissioners? Commissioner Schreiber.
The signalized, the one to the left over there, I guess that's the first one that you discussed.
Western.
Yeah. If you're making a left into that from the fairway, there, I believe, is a turning lane, a left lane to go in there that's separate from the main road?
Sure. So, and that's a great point. I apologize. I did gloss over that. So anywhere that we're proposing the signalized access point, so the westernmost, and I guess what I'll call the eastern central driveway, we are proposing to provide for dedicated left turn lanes into those driveways, not only on the north side, excuse me, of the intersection, but also on the south side of the intersection. They would be separate dedicated left turn lanes that would take those left turn movements out of the through lanes on the fairway.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Thank you.
Other questions?
Right now, on the easternmost end of the parking lot, yes. Can you describe what that's going to be like? Is that going to remain an open entrance into the parking lot?
So that driveway will remain a right-in, right-out only driveway. So we will be extending the median that exists, as I'm showing here on the plan. We'll be extending the existing median to close off the ability for anyone to make a left in or a left out of that driveway. So if you want to make a left out and travel east on the fairway, you would have to come out and around to this signalized driveway here to make a signalized left rather than a left at an unsignalized access point. So this curb cut will remain in its current location, but it will be revised to eliminate the lefts in and the lefts out from the fairway. You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Coswell. Any other questions? Commissioner Bowman.
Is the current owner of the shopping center in accord with all these changes?
It's in accord, as I've tried to say. When we submitted our application to the zoning hearing board, and we submitted our amended plan that had changes, he was in accord with the redoing of the parking lot, all the parking lot redoing. We had not talked about the access improvements that Matt's talking about. We have given the owner of the shopping center the drawings. It's a little hard to get people to pay attention when you need an approval from them, so recently we have had conversations with them. They're fine with either end. The traffic signal on the west end closing off the right end. They're okay with the second signal. The one comment that we have gotten, and it's not over yet, is just where Matt is now. There's some question, their concern is that they view that entrance now, the way it's wide open, as the main center to the shopping center. And they're concerned about us cutting off the left turn in. We have heard no other comment. Quite frankly, we've been chasing them. We got this information today, and I called Mike so that we could tell you that today. So the bottom line is, we believe that we're okay on practically everything except the possibility of eliminating their left in and their left out. And that's why I asked Matt the question about what does he think the effect will ultimately be of putting a signalized intersection on either side. For what it's worth, I agree with him to the extent that that was the main entrance and that's where people were making lefts in. They'll be much more inclined to use either one of the signalized intersections on either side. So we're going to go back and try and get an approval. The worst that we come back with, I believe, is that we cannot eliminate the left turn in and the left turn out in that one intersection.
Yeah, I can see his concern because that kind of is the main entrance, at least as far as I was concerned when I go down there. Don't really want to add two lights to the fairway. I can see the light to get the people in and out of their apartment, since you're going to add, 400 apartments. But that second light, I don't know. You're saying that would improve traffic flow?
So I think one of the biggest issues here and the genesis behind the changes that we are proposing is the fact that the township staff, the township traffic engineer expressed concerns with respect to the operation of the fairway and the safety of the fairway as it exists today. Apparently, and I haven't seen the records, but there have been a number of accidents or crashes along the fairway over the years, not necessarily attributable to this shopping center itself, but along the fairway itself. So we were tasked with looking at how we could improve the safety and thereby the operations and the traffic flow along the fairway, and by providing these changes as we proposed, as well as the two signalized access points, I think we've done a very good job of significantly improving not only the safety, but the operation and the traffic flow. Now, one of the comments that you had made is with respect to that access point that we were talking about and the fact that it is the main access to the shopping center. But what I would point out is that one of the reasons why it is the main access today is because it is so wide open.
Yeah,
and because you come in, it's a very wide open area that leads you straight back to behind the center. With the changes that we're proposing, as Mr. Bonoski had mentioned, we're looking to clean that area up, provide a T, so when you come in, you have to make a left or a right, and you have those defined drive aisles through that area. So while today it may seem like the main access point because it's wide and open, and that's what people have been using it for, because the westernmost access point today is a right in, right out, adding that traffic signal and cleaning this area up will now relocate that main access point to the western side of the center.
Matt, can I add this? I was in the meetings. My understanding of why we ended up with the second traffic signal was more for protection of pedestrians. We had those two mid-block crossings, and you have an elderly population across the street. And while the signal at the western end would take care of that part of the problem, it did not take care of the protection of the pedestrians. Now, I think that's where you and Brian got. Would you comment on that?
Sure, and that's a good point. That is one of the considerations as to the second signal was, Mr. Keaveney had talked about, could we move the signal further east, not only to serve the center, but also to maybe serve some of those existing mid-block crosswalks. Again, keeping in mind that those mid-block crosswalks are in this location here, as I'm referring, and this location here. So while you may move that signal a little bit closer, it still would have been a longer walk when you had predominantly on the south side an older residential community, as well as on the east side of the development, or the center, that is. So by providing that second signal, which does meet the PennDOT warrants for a traffic signal, we're able to not only improve the safety and the flow, but also provide those pedestrians with a safe crossing at a signalized intersection within the same proximity as the existing mid-block crosswalk.
Will you address what I suspect Mr. Bowman was thinking about? Would you address the coordination of how the two signals will sort of work as one, how they would be coordinated so that there will be, what do you guys call it, platooning along the fairway?
Sure, and if we're able to move forward through this process and get into land development, one of the things that we're going to have to do is make an application to PennDOT. Even though the fairway is not a PennDOT-owned roadway, all traffic signals are all traffic control devices within the Commonwealth are permitted, or approved and permitted by PennDOT. So we will need to seek their approval. One of the things that was discussed, as Mr. Kaplan had mentioned, was that when we add those two signals, not only will they have the latest and greatest in equipment, but they will also be coordinated. So not only those two new signals work in concert with one another, but they also work in concert with the existing signal at 611 and the fairway, so that all the traffic can flow through this area in a more, platooned or coordinated fashion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Sanchez.
I believe the witness answered it. I was going to chime into Commissioner Bowman's question. That signal is at the eastern end is crucial because of those two mid-block crossings, and in that general vicinity, there was a pedestrian fatality about a year ago. A woman struck by a vehicle. So we can't touch the Rydell Park entrance because it's not on the property, which is Mr. Hammond's pointing out there. But the other area there is really ideal for it, being between those two mid-blocks, and also to calm the traffic coming in and out of there. One of the big issues was the pedestrian conflict with cars coming out of the center and making the left turn to go east on the fairway. Really, really dangerous there. So just wanted to put that on there, and the gentleman answered it well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thompson.
At that same intersection, the western left turn lane coming into the shopping center, I would imagine at a typical evening commute, we have people coming into the new apartment complex, but there's also people going in there for dinner. Do you know how many cars are going to stack up in that left turn lane?
Sure. Bear with me 1 second when I find. So it looks as if, depending on the time periods, we looked at not only the weekday AM peak hour, but the PM peak hour and the Saturday midday peak hour. It looked like approximately, at the worst case scenario, it'd be 315 feet of stacking for those vehicles making a left.
315 feet? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Now, keep in mind that this left turn lane, as shown here, does not accommodate the entire 315 feet. We have maximized it to the extent possible. As you can see, it's basically backs up to the existing area over here at the Noble Town Center where their driveway is. So we've extended it to the extent possible.
So when traffic overfills that left turn lane, then the fairway is obstructed at that point, as cars sit in the travel lane? Waiting
No,
to
it
get
shouldn't be
around?
obstructed. There is, the fairway is very wide in that area, so you still have the ability to get past that area.
But you're going into a bicycle lane to get past at that point, on the right side?
There may be instances where that may occur. But if you look at the analysis and what has been done is that queue clears out every time. So there may be an instance where that queue stacks up through that area outside of that left turn, but then it will clear out when the light turns green. One of the things that we will be looking at, and it goes hand in hand with the discussion we had, or what I mentioned about the coordination of the signals, is that when we get into that process, if we're able to move forward, when we start to look at the coordination of those signals, the two new signals as well as the signal at 611 and the fairway, we will be timing them such that we will be maximizing the amount of vehicles able to get in and out of those driveways, and therefore reducing the queue. So as it stands right now with the preliminary analysis, it's saying 315 feet, but I would suspect that by the time we get to the full design of these signals, because right now it's conceptual, by the time we get to the full design of those signals, we will be able to reduce that queue such that it will either stay within that lane, or we may be able to steal a little bit of the left turn lane on the back side of the left turn lane that we're proposing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions? Vice President Klein.
Can you go into the effects of the development on the intersection of the Fairway and Rydell Road?
Sure. So, in this, we have the aerial.
What are you looking for?
The aerial. Fairway and Rydell. No, it's not showing that.
There is an area. Yeah. Click this again, see if it
Close out.
closes out.
There we go.
So that's out of everything, and just open that.
Yeah, that may be it. Yeah. We just may have too much open, Matt.
We may. So I'll just leave this, unfortunately.
I can give you exit out and restart,
Yeah.
and then just pull it back up. I think it
All
would have a
tabs.
switch memory, yeah.
Okay, try this again.
Yeah, try that again.
Out of memory.
How many, do you have it open twice down here?
Close it this one. This one again. Close out this one.
Huh?
Well, I think everyone's familiar with where the Fairway and Rydell are. One of the things, here we go. So I'm afraid to do anything here that messes this up. So the Fairway and Rydell is this intersection. So this is the Whole Food Center here. This is the easternmost access point, and then here is the intersection of Fairway and Rydell. What happens, obviously, is we're proposing to add some additional traffic to the roadway associated with the apartment complex, but there's very little that can be done at this intersection with respect to the overall improvements due to the fact that we are proposing some significant improvements along the frontage. But by adding those 2 traffic signals, obviously, we're going to be able to create some gaps in traffic along the fairway, which should help the intersection of the fairway and Rydell. But there are existing issues, to my understanding, that exist at the intersection, which obviously, if we add 1 or 2 more vehicles, will make the issues stand out slightly more. One of the things that we were asked, because we had concentrated so much time and effort on the frontage of the center, one of the things we were asked to do was to coordinate between traffic engineers, between myself, between the township's traffic engineer, and looking at whether or not there were some minor revisions that could be made to that intersection, striping, signage, things of that nature could be done to help improve the operations, because it is somewhat of a non-traditional type intersection where you have multiple movements and different maneuvers coming in. So again, if we're able to move forward, based on the last meeting we had with township staff and with Mr. Keaveney in September, we'd be looking at seeing if there's some modifications we could make that were what I'll classify as low-hanging fruit, striping, signage, things of that nature that help alleviate some of those concerns that exist today.
Okay. Any other questions from commissioners? If there are none, Mr. Kaplan, is this the extent of your witnesses?
It is, Mr. President, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's the third and final one. All right, did you have a question, Commissioner?
Mr. Kaplan, just going back to a question I asked you earlier, actually, of the architect about the green roofs. Your, I believe it's the application that you showed us, is your Exhibit 1. Right above your signature on the last page, item D talks about 50% green roof in order to get bonus credits. Is that still applicable to this application?
I do not believe so.
So that's out of play at this point?
No, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I had a chance to make that comment, we will now open the floor up for comments from commissioners.
Commissioner Hooper, I don't think we're going to be concluding tonight.
Correct.
So I recommend that any comments from commissioners be held off. And before we go to comments from members of the public, if I may, I'd like to just ask Mr. Kaplan a few questions.
Sure.
Mr. Kaplan, you were scheduled to present this application in front of the Planning Commission on this past Thursday evening. Is that correct?
Well, at the last minute, we were asked to appear, and then we had the snow, and so that all got killed.
Okay, so you didn't go before the Planning Commission
No,
this
we
past
did not.
week? Okay. And as you and I discussed this afternoon, it's your intent to go to the Planning Commission in December, at the December 11th Planning Commission?
Well, the answer is yes, but as I said to you on the phone, Mike, I'd like to get a resolution of this last hanging item with the owner, and I want to be able to come to the board and say, we would like you to approve our application subject and impose the conditions, the traffic conditions. I gotta be sure that we will be able to do that. So whether you and I will figure out the times, and I suspect that it will be in January. If we can pull it off and we can get an approval from the landlord, we'll go in December. But whatever extensions of time are necessary, we'll grant. As you know, we've been at this for a couple of years.
So Mr. Kaplan, under the best-case scenario, you'd be able to resolve the issues with the landlord, get to the Planning Commission on the 11th, and then be back here for a final vote on December 13th.
That's
Best
the
case
best case
scenario.
conditions, yes, sir.
But in the event you're unable to resolve the issues with the landlord, you're unable to get to the planning commission on the 11th of December, you're agreeable to pushing this for a potential final vote sometime into January at our regular meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very good. Thank you for clarification, Solicitor. At this time, we'll open the floor up to comments from residents. If you would, come to the podium, state your name and address for the record. Keep your comments within 3 minutes if possible. Thank you.
Hi, Amanda Detweiler, 11, sure, Detweiler, 1116 Penmore Place, Rydell. I just have a couple of questions. On the traffic study, how does the new Rydell Waters exit affect the traffic on the fairways? So Rydell Waters' new plan calls for an exit through the Rydell Waters parking lot. They'll be allowed, those 80 homes will be allowed to exit to the fairway.
Excuse me, Amanda, we were taking comments at this time, not
Oh, not
questions
questions?
and answers. Mr. Kaplan, did you want to get Ms. Amanda's name and address and?
Sure.
And Ms. Detweiler, as you may have heard the conversation
previous.
between Mr. Kaplan and myself, this matter will at some point be going to the Planning Commission.
All right.
Either on December 11th or sometime in January. At that time, you would have the opportunity to ask those questions.
Could I just ask, just so we get clarification? So are you talking about the development that Rydell Park
Rydell
bought
Waters,
years
yeah.
ago? And how many houses are coming out where?
77?
Are coming out where?
Well, there'll be two, I'm sure we can go over the plans with you, but there'll be an entrance onto 611 and then through the back, through their existing parking lot structure.
I don't know that we have any information with regard to that to be able to give you an answer. And quite frankly, that's not our project.
Yes, it's just a township concern related to the traffic on the fairway, which seems to directly involve your project. But that's just my comment, right? So I just made a comment.
Okay,
All right.
second one?
Well, everything was in the form of a question. So my other comment would be, I would be interested in seeing how Highland School, as the school impacted from the apartments, will be able to handle the additional students. I'm sure there's a positive tax benefit to the school, but of course, Highland doesn't have the capacity to handle 50 more kids. So I would be interested at the Planning Commission meeting to see some sort of impact study there. And then my last comment would be, I would also be interested in understanding if the synchronization of PennDOT between the Fairway and 611 also includes the Fairway and Susquehanna. Because if those lights aren't aligned, it will be a large problem. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments from residents?
Yeah, Herb McMahon, McMahon, 1046 Huntington Road. If I was the landlord, one of the main considerations I would have is on the left-hand side or on the west side, all the construction material is going to have to come in through that one entrance. And I would imagine that construction will probably take more than 2 years. And I can't imagine the mess that that would create for the shopping center and to the traffic in the area. To me, it boils down to density. I think that I'd be interested in knowing about the impact to the infrastructure and utilities, to public safety. I would think if you had a major fire up there, you know, all the fire engines have to come in that western route. And the proposed second emergency breakthrough, I think it looks like it's going to Trader Joe's. And if you know anything about Trader Joe's lot and the configuration in that area, I think that that's really not an adequate emergency plan. So I think public safety is a major concern, and I just have concerns just in general with the amount of development that's happening in the area. And I know this developer is just one of many, and this is probably not geared or directed at the developer, but rather at the commissioners. You got BET, you have Penn State. Yes.
This is just for this application tonight. Comments regarding this application?
Okay, but I think it ties into the Ride of Waters. I think there's a lot of moving parts all in this very close vicinity.
Okay. Any other comments?
So that's my concern, is that the impact to the area and to the traffic, I think everything has to be taken into consideration together.
Okay. Any other comments, sir?
That's it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments from residents? Okay. Mr. Kaplan, did you have any closing statements you want to make?
No, sir.
Oh, you have another one? I'm sorry. I couldn't see you. I'm sorry. The monitor blocked you. I couldn't see you.
My name is Patricia Levenbach, Levenbach, 1570 The Fairway, in the East, Bridal East and East Building. My concerns or comments are, it's very dangerous for the shareholders. It's an older population crossing over. I'm not sure if I understand if there will be a light on both sides of the fairway, or if they're just on the entrances into the shopping center. The other concern is the residents walking across. They have to step up a curb, walk across dirt. With all this additional traffic and everything coming in, I believe there really should be a walkway that goes through the grass center of the fairway, and that the curbs be turned into handicap. We have a lot of people that walk that over there with walkers. Okay, thank you.
Quick answer. We're
Yes, sir.
going to do that.
Good answer.
It'll all be ADA. That's the whole reason for the second light, is to put the crosswalks along a light, and when we do the light, we got to do ADA from one end to the other, so we will.
Okay. This doesn't have anything to do with the building, but there is a dire need for a turning arrow at the Fairway and Susquehanna to turn a left. There are times that you can only get one car through there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments from residents? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Solicitor,
I think it would be appropriate for a motion to recess this hearing until Thursday, December 13th, 2018 at 7:30 PM.
right.
I'll make that.
Motion to recess.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Motion made
make
by
that motion.
Vice President Kaplan, seconded by Commissioner Spiegelman. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes. The meeting is adjourned and recessed until Thursday, December 13th.
Yeah, but I don't have any real super hurry. Yeah, yeah.